Donald Trump calls on Americans to stand united, adding, "We will fear not," hours after the Republican candidate and former US president narrowly escaped what FDI has now called an assassination bid. Trump was speaking at a rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, when loud noises were heard in the crowd on Saturday evening. Trump appeared to have been struck by something in the right eye as he was speaking, and in a fraction of a second later is seen ducking down to the ground, almost simultaneously swarmed by security agents as a shield. Trump was then quickly escorted from the stage and into his vehicle, but just before that, he had his fist clenched, and what media have reported as him saying, "Fight, fight," amid chants of US, US, US. This imagery, according to many political pundits, is now being seen as the defining moment of US presidential elections. That's there on your screen of him clenching his fist. US President and rival Joe Biden has condemned the attack.
There's no place in America for this kind of violence. It's sick. It's sick. It's one of the reasons why we have to unite this country. We cannot allow for this to be happening. We cannot be like this. We cannot condone this. And I want to thank the Secret Service and all the agencies, including the state agencies, that have been engaged in making sure that people and we have more detail to come relative to other people maybe injured in the audience. I don't have all that detail. We'll make that available to you. The Trump rally was a rally that he should have been able to be conducted peacefully without any problem. But the idea that there's political violence or violence in America like this is just unheard of. It's just not appropriate. And everybody must condemn it.
The shooter in this case, who was killed by the snipers, according to the FBI, is a 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, who's identified as a Republican. The motive behind the shooting, though, is not known yet. A prodigy of sorts, according to records in his school. A video, though, has emerged on social media of Secret Service snipers in action after the assassin bid. One of the two snipers, who were placed on the roof of a building near the rally stage, is seen raising his head, having possibly spotted the shooter. The snipers then open fire. But there are also huge concerns over what are being looked at as alleged lapses, raising questions at the Secret Services. An eyewitness speaking to the BBC has claimed that he was among those who were seen accused crawling on the roof with a rifle, but claims the police did not act.
Probably 5 to 7 minutes of Trump speaking. I'm estimating here. I have no idea, but we noticed a guy crawling, bear crawling up the roof of the building beside us, 50 feet away from us. So we're standing there, we're pointing at the guy crawling up the roof.
And he had a gun, right?
He had a rifle. We could clearly see him with a rifle, absolutely. We're pointing at him. The police are down there running around on the ground. We're like, "Hey man, there's a guy on the roof with a rifle." And the police are like, "Huh, what?" Like they didn't know what was going on. We're like, "Hey, right here on the roof, we can see him from right here. We see him. He's crawling."
The Trump campaign launched a fundraiser for the victims caught in the crossfire of an attempted assassination on the ex-president's life. Country heads from across the world have condemned this violence. Prime Minister Modi said, "Deeply concerned by the attack on my friend. Violence has no place in politics and democracies." French president called it a tragedy. UK, Russia, China and Ukraine heads condemned the violence, among others. All right. Let's try and understand, what does this mean? What does this mean for United States, for its presidential elections, and for the rest of the world? I'm being joined by Dr. John Harrison, who's a Homeland Security expert, Vibhuti Jha, who's an ex-Republican candidate for the New York Assembly, Rohit Sharma, who's a journalist based at the Washington, D.C. and covers White House, Trinjoy Chaudhary, who's a consultant with us. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us. Let me just come to you at this point, Rohit Sharma. Could you just tell us, how is the White House looking at this? What is happening there hours after Donald Trump has managed to survive this assassination bid?
Look, I think President Joe Biden made it very clear that this is, an act of violence that should not have happened. It should not have occurred. The U.S. is not placed for such political violence. He's taken interest in understanding what had happened. He was on call with security, Secret Service yesterday, with FBI people. Everybody was briefing him. He cut down his trip to Delaware and he flew to Washington, D.C. last night. He obviously is trying to keep tabs on what's going on. And essentially, it's been hours, at least 16 hours of shock and horror in the U.S. People are not able to still comprehend that President Trump, his life was in danger by this person who people are calling assassin, some people are calling a terrorist. We do not know much at this point in time, but what we do know is that America is really, really shocked. And this is coming in the midst of a very important election cycle in the U.S. where Joe Biden has termed this election as the election about democracy. So, everybody has their theories about all of this, but I can tell you this.
Right.
Nobody on either side of the spectrum is willing to, take light of the situation or make light of the situation. People are ramping upon having investigation done in this attack. And obviously, as we saw from Donald Trump, we're seeing from Donald Trump that people wanted to see after January 6th. He's calling people to unite behind him. This is a different Donald Trump than what we saw 4 years ago. And a lot of voters, and especially the independent voters, are taking a note of how Donald Trump has reacted after this attack.
Right. In fact, if I can just get in Dr. John Harrison at this point. Dr. John Harrison, while there has been huge appreciation for how the Secret Service agents swung into action, swamped Donald Trump, rushed him off into his vehicle, guarded him, there's huge appreciation for that. There are also questions being raised at this point. There are eyewitnesses who have come on record and have said that, listen, we had seen this person on the roof and he was crawling roof to roof and we had alerted the police. How is the security establishment looking at these eyewitnesses' account? Are there huge concerns that are now at the forefront as well?
Oh, well, there certainly will be huge concerns, and I don't think anybody would, in the right mind, would criticize the Secret Service agents how they responded. They are the best of the best and some of the bravest. What the question will be is, how did something so obvious be overlooked, including the fact that the counter sniper teams were actually looking at that location. So, it's as a layman in operational security terms, it immediately jumped to me. It's how do you not have local law enforcement either on the roof itself, or if there's a concern for communications, making sure that rooftop is not accessible to anybody. It's always unclear in any of these events when eyewitnesses say, well, they told somebody and law enforcement didn't seem to be responding. We don't know actually at this point how they were responding. And it's very dangerous for law enforcement to send somebody up onto a roof that may or may not have a potential active shooter that is being covered by another agency. You would not want to put that law enforcement person's life at any more risk simply because it would be poor communication when an officer is charging onto a scene to try to see if there is a threat there. But that will be the biggest, I think, concern, is how did something that appeared to be this obvious, and at least, as I said, from an operational layman's terms, that it got overlooked, or at least it only had one layer of security. And I think that's really the biggest key. The Secret Service always has a layer
Dr.
after
John
layer
Harrison,
of security
is it about
around
the fact that there was only one layer of security, but also the fact that now emerges from the different assessments that have been made by different people based on the eyewitness accounts and based also on the locations that have eventually emerged, what seems to be just a 200-meter difference between where the former president was speaking as well as where the shooter seemed to have positioned himself. It seems to be, at least from the records that we are seeing, just about 200 meters. How could a house, a group of houses in a very, very small location like that go unmarked? That's a big question, isn't it?
It's a huge question, and it's one that the Secret Service to date has obviously not answered or not addressed at all. And as you saw, the statements from the FBI have been quite diplomatic in directing those comments back to the Secret Service. That's going to be the biggest question here that everybody has. Not just that the shooter was able to get into that position undetected, but how did they gain access to the location to begin with? And I mean, that's going, and yes, it was outside the immediate perimeter. We understand that, but such an obvious location would seem to require more than just a counter sniper team observing that. If that is usual Secret Service procedure, then the procedure, I think, desperately needs to be reviewed.
Absolutely. In fact, Vibhuti Jha, a former Republican candidate for New York, also joins us right now. Thank you so much for joining us. How is this being looked at in the US? Of course, we all know it, but it's literally throwing US back to some of the darkest times in its history. Something that US would not be very proud of, but also raises huge questions on how US has positioned itself as this big country that's very, very strong on safety and security. And this is none other than a former president, and we're talking about 2024.
Thank you for having me. And it's a very, very important question you asked here. What is also happening in America, as I have seen it over a period of time, that somewhere along the line, the rhetoric, the political rhetoric of hate that goes on, and extreme words are used to categorize a person or brand a person in a particular way. Mr. Harrison pointed out very valid questions on the security lapse. How did this guy climb over there? I can't help but recall what Senator Schumer had warned President Trump in his very first term, saying that beware of don't take chances with the intelligence agencies. They know how to get you 6 days from Sunday or something like that. So this is very critical. But what is important here is that ever since Trump assumed presidency in 2016, there is a hate words used against Mr. Trump. And that's pretty disgusting. Branding him that he's a threat to democracy, he's an enemy of democracy. Branding him as if he's a fascist guy, branding him as if he will take away everybody's liberties and impose his will because he's a dictator. These kind of languages definitely triggers a mind we do not know. Whether he was a lone wolf or a part of a pack, we would never know.
This kind of a language, while I understand Republicans and top leaders from Republicans have made this objection as well, pointing out to certain statements made by Biden as well. But you would agree that this kind of a language is not just one-sided. It's not just from Biden. It often comes from either sides and both the sides, irrespective of where it is. So can you really pin it down to that?
I'm talking about the political verbiage they used as an extreme from everybody. In this particular instance, I'm not condoning Republicans for making this statement. Nobody can condone that, just as no political leader in the world will ever say that this was not a dastardly attack. So everybody will sympathize there. There are certain commonalities of it. But think about it from this perspective. The extent to which the words got used from this guy, the Godfather guy, the actor from New York, who said, "I wish I punch him in the nose." Madonna and others, wish we could blow up the White House. Or Johnny Depp saying that, ever imagine an actor assassinating a president. These are the things I have not seen coming from Republican side. These are while the political rhetoric can be angry, can be distasteful, but when you talk about when Kathy was taking President Trump's head soaked in blood and showing it on the TV. So there are any number of examples of hate being propagated against this man, perhaps very unjustifiably. This is the part which I'm talking about. I'm
Okay,
not
Srinjoy
condoning
Chaudhary is also
anybody.
waiting for us. Srinjoy Chaudhary, allow me 2 minutes. Allow me 2 minutes, Srinjoy Chaudhary. Before I come to you, let me just quickly go across to Rohit Sharma. Rohit Sharma, you just heard what Vibhuti Jha has spoken. Do you want to quickly respond to it? While Vibhuti Jha has, of course, made a very important point and pertinent point that many democracies across the world, and not just democracies, can take a leaf from when it comes to hate and vitriol during the campaign and otherwise, but particularly to what he has said, how is the White House and the Democrats looking at this?
Well, look, I mean, I think I agree with what Mr. Jha had just said, but I mean, I also disagree in some parts. I think the toxic rhetoric has been from both sides. I remember when President Obama got elected in 2008. People were, I mean, there was a Tea Party movement, which was essentially what we call the right-wing extremist party in the MAGA group right now. So I think it has been boiling since then. This isn't just attack that just occurred. I think with the duration of last 15, 16 years, we've seen that, the America that we all knew has changed, right? And when did it all start? It all started when America elected its first black president, and the Republicans started demeaning him. They refused to work with him. And that's how I think we've gotten to a point where Trump announced his candidacy. Hillary Clinton, said, the Trump supporters are a basket of deplorables. I mean, it has just gotten worse. And I think a lot of people, analysts and pundits in the US have been saying this, that this has to stop. And not today. They've been talking about this for the last 8-10 years, that something of this sort could happen. And it actually did. And I agree with Mr. Trump when he said, God saved him. A matter of a second, if he had his face in the other direction, that bullet would have gotten his head.
That's true.
So a lot of thinking to do, a lot of thinking for Americans to do, especially when it comes to the soul of America, and try to rise above this rhetoric. We're already seeing President Trump trying to do that. He's not asking his supporters to do anything weird, stupid, riots. He's trying to unite the people. So is Joe Biden. And I think we should all try to do that rather than pinpointing fingers at this crucial juncture in our democracy.
Right. In fact, Srinjoy Chaudhary, let me just take that straight to you. And it's interesting what Rohit Sharma says, that Donald Trump is not doing anything quote unquote stupid. He's being very calculated in what he needs to. But the point is, it's also his moment. Many political pundits have gone ahead and said this could be the turning point, the defining moment of the presidential elections in the United States. Across the world leaders have gone ahead and condemned it, from India, Russia, China, Ukraine, and so many others. How is the scanner now on the United States? They've always held themselves as the strongest democracy, as the model democracy, as the protector of the weak, and yet you have them transported to the darkest of times. I mean, let's face the fact, the United States has had a ghastly history of political violence, whether it be for its political representatives or civil rights leaders. And all of that seems to just come afresh to the memory with how minutely and narrowly really Donald Trump managed to escape or survive this, Srinjoy.
Yeah, if you look at all these names, Lincoln, McKinley, Garfield, Kennedy, these are just 4 presidents. You had 46 presidents. 4 of them have been assassinated, and 2 have just survived somehow. Let's not forget Ronald Reagan. He was shot by John Hinckley, and he survived. In fact, he told his wife, Nancy Reagan, I forgot
back in 1981, that's right.
And now you have and now you have Donald Trump. So that's a lot of attempted assassinations, 4 successful. Then you have a lot of others. Look at Dr. Martin Luther King, Nobel laureate. Look at Bobby Kennedy. In fact, his son is contesting. Look at several others. So there are George Wallace, Gerald Ford, barely survived. So there are so many. Now the point is, as far as this case is concerned, there are 2 things that people are saying in India. First of all, before any VIP, whether in India, whether in America, whether in any country, there has to be a sanitization. Now, these security people, why didn't they sanitize that place? That's the first question I'm hearing. The second, perhaps even more important, is that once the VVIP is in place, the security people are responsible for what is called a 360-degree look. You look everywhere to see if everything is in place. And clearly, especially if policemen were told by people, look, here is a guy who's getting on to the roof. What were people doing? A very kind way of looking at this huge lapse is imagining that one organization thought it was someone from another organization, and etc., etc. Now, if that is what people thought, it's still a big mistake. So, and Donald Trump nearly paid for it. I mean, what he has done, he's just been very lucky. And I imagine, as far as this election was concerned, at least for the next few weeks, there will be a considerable sympathy factor. In any case, he's going into Milwaukee, and there he will probably come back out of it with a 2-3% bump. So that will give him a considerable lead. Since he's already 2-3% ahead, he will have a 5% lead. Not that 5% is a huge number. Historically, in 1988, Michael Dukakis had a 17-point lead, and he lost by 8 points. So these things happen. But regardless of everything in India, everybody is surprised that these basic checks were not followed by the security personnel.
Absolutely, Srinjoy. Absolutely, you're spot on with that. Actually, not just India. I'm sure the world is really shocked about that. I don't have much time. Dr. John, to you a minute, and then I would like to go to Mr. Vibhuti Jha for a minute. Dr. John, very quickly, do you want to respond to what Srinjoy has said? That there seems to be big lapses in just some basic measures that are really the preliminary grounds, whether it be a 360 view or what seems to be the sanitization process. I mean, would heads roll? Is there any other way at looking at this?
Yeah, they should.
I think there will be some heads will roll. The head of the Secret Service has not been out in any interviews yet, taking responsibility. But I'm sure that person will ultimately have to pay the price for this major, what appears at least to be a major and significant gap in a time when not only is it very sensitive politically, but we've seen around the world politicians in the UK, in Japan, and in many others have been targeted. So this should not have been a surprise that there was a level of security. There's already a debate going on now that apparently the Trump team did ask for additional security, and the Secret Service did not grant that. Well, that more of that information will come out certainly during any investigation once that starts.
All right, and Mr. Vibhuti Jha, very quickly, to the politics that's going around this, many saying Trump, with his bleeding ears and the blood trickling through his cheek, even as he raised his hands in a fist, is the defining moments of the US presidential elections. How would you see this?
I think it is. It is a defining moment. He survived. That was a big thing. He survived. It's very critical that how does one emerge from a tragic attack of this kind? And you saw his fist pumping going on. He must have also realized that the bullet passed his ears, hitting him over there. So that is very critical as well. So that image, we live in a world of instant imaging and perceptions. It will definitely be very effective. Plus, I go back to this. Very important. The global leadership, political leadership in democracy, they have a responsibility to ensure that their rhetoric doesn't trigger a weak mind or anything as a plot or a plan. That's very important for all political leaders to bear in mind.
Right. Dr. John Harrison, Vibhuti Jha, Rohit Sharma, as well as Srinjoy Chaudhary, thank you very much for joining us. In fact, even as Trump says, United States needs to stand together and fear no one. We hope and pray that will be true for the United States, even though it's a very crucial election year and the presidential elections has seen already many unprecedented chapters of United States anyway. Thank you very much, all of you, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.